Hi, my name is Anthony da Costa, and I'm a guitarist and songwriter and producer in Nashville, Tennessee. And we're here in East Nashville today to talk about the Benson Monarch plugin presented by Mixwave. In terms of my use case of both Benson amps and the Mixwave plugin, naturally, the second my first couple Bensons showed up at my door, I started recording them nonstop. And it was actually while I was visiting Chris in Portland, I guess 4 years ago now, that he started playing me a song that he was working on. And I was like, this sounds great. And I heard that Benson Spring reverb I have a Benson Spring that goes on all my vocals, and I run all sorts of stuff through it all the time at my studio, Pleasantville recording in Nashville. And I remember him playing me this track, and I was like, man, that guitar sounds good. And man, the reverb, yeah, it sounds great. And he goes, it's a plugin. And I was totally fooled. Now, I'm not saying you should never buy a real Benson amp, because there's nothing like having the thing in front of you. But let me tell you, as someone who is a producer, who travels a lot for tour, I'm constantly working on different projects. I will get a call from someone saying, hey, can you play guitar on this? I need it by tomorrow. And I'm in a hotel room in Des Moines. I can actually access my sound, my Benson sound, via the Mixwave plugin. And I have used the plugin on tons of records. In terms of the Chimera one, the original Mixwave plugin, I tracked tons of guitar live in my studio, which, the one I have now is a smaller couple rooms. And I told myself, I'll just reamp it later. This is just for monitoring. I have literally never reamped a single guitar that I've run through my Mixwave Chimera plugin. So in the box has never been like a romantic thing for like recording enthusiasts. But this is the only box that I think I'd like to use at this point for my guitar sounds, is using this Mixwave plugin. So it's been fun to be able to kind of see where Mixwave has taken it. And I love the Chimera, and I think the Monarch Reverb one is even better. So the first preset that we came up with, I decided to call it Play It Safe, which to me was sort of like a great kind of like, here's my clean tone. I'm not super interested in like, here's my clean tone, but like this is just the Monarch Reverb, where we got the amp and the cab. So there is essentially my clean tone. Still kind of pushing a little bit, and these pickups are kind of medium output. Another cool thing about the Mixwave plugin is that you have full control over your gain staging, like almost too much control of your gain staging, which is great. You have an input volume, you have an output volume, you have the volume on your guitar, the volume on your preamp. There's a lot of different ways that you can kind of like interact with the plugin. So right now I have the input attenuated just a little bit, just because these have a little bit more output than a vintage P90. I like the boost, and this is not quite unity, but almost. This next preset is called Here Comes the Sun. So this preset is a little wild, and I understand that. But to me, part of what's so fun about this plugin is that there's so much possibility sonically to do things that you technically, I guess if you had all these things lined up in front of you, you could do this on a board. But there's something about the effects that are added to it, like beyond the amp simulation, that to me makes this that much more interactive. And like I'm still coming up with combinations of these effects that I'm like not necessarily going to do on a pedal board. So I've got the Germanium Boost. That's kind of an always on thing for me at this point. I've got the Germanium Fuzz, a lot of germanium happening. Get rid of some of this crazier stuff. I love the way the boost into the fuzz reacts. This is typically how I have it on my board, is the boost and the fuzz and then the preamp, which is the exact order that I have it on my board. Now, the other kind of interesting thing about this preset, and something I think that the Mixwave stuff is cool, is you have a separate I guess sort of like emulation of the amp and the cabinet. So one of my favorite things to do is just turn off the cabinet and see what just like technically, I guess, like the amp would sound like, you know, kind of even more than just the preamp, like the output stage 2 just going into nothing. And to me, it makes the amp sounds and anything in front of it a lot more visceral. And then once you introduce the cab, things kind of round up, and this is where you get to kind of play with the microphones. I kind of have like a 57, like just a little bit off the cone. I have their 47, I believe, just kind of off axis to the left. And just because in real life, like you may not be recording 2 different cabinets, but I think it's awesome that you have another one to kind of play with. And I think I've got a ribbon down there. And then we bring in the Florist. The Florist was the first pedal of Chris's that took me a second to understand and maybe even like. And now I cannot get enough of it. And I actually think my favorite version of the Florist is currently in this box, because I've already been using it on as a vocal bus, like kind of like bubbling under the surface modulation stuff. You can kind of get it to do weird tape fluctuation stuff. And this sound and this kind of like weird kind of pulse and the way it's reacting to the low end of the guitar. This is for Chris. Because that sounds like a sound he would make me listen to in his barn. And then of course the delay. I'm the Benson delay for a slapback that's just running away a little bit. And again, let's get rid of the cab. Could probably even afford all of it. Again, this stuff reacts, and I'm not used to this stuff being able to react. So it's amazing. Cool. My next preset is called You're Good. I am a little upset they didn't put a ring stain on the amplifier cabinet. Maybe they can figure that out for the next edition. I typically have the American channel of the Monarch going, not just because I'm an American or a xenophobe. I like to have a little bit more meat. But again, kind of fun to hear what each preset's going to sound like if you just bounce between the two. This is British. American. Now let's add the Tall Bird back in and kill some of the stuff we've built. What's that? We have the randomizer going on the LFO. Kind of a room sound too. Anyway, it's fun. Something else about the plugin that I think is important to note is that you kind of have your choice of placing the effects obviously before or after the amplifier. And for me, that's kind of fun because when I was just a guitar player, whatever I was doing before, like obviously I have my delay. I don't mess with loops and all that kind of stuff. I just like to have stuff in front of an amp. You're essentially taking the Benson delay, you're taking the Benson Florist. If you want the reverb, you can treat any of these as outboard effects now. You can treat them as things that go after the amplifier. And that's something that I do all the time in the studio. So in a couple of these cases, I'm running the effects long after the cabinet, you know. Okay, last one. It's called Professional Mood.